Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for showing up today and joining us this afternoon. This is a workshop lifting equity through liberty, justice, belonging. So today you all will be hearing about equitable opportunities for children, youth, and families with intellectual and developmental disabilities and community pathways at times is overlooked. So we have with us today Joanna Stafford, Jennifer Sanchez, and Lita Albright. They will highlight how one organization is building equity through justice, liberty, and belonging, enduring principles that map to the integrated core practice model, a capacity building, train the trainer model with communities of practice has engaged participation for all roles. So thank you all for joining us. As a reminder, please feel free to place any questions in the chat, and we will do our best to have those responded to probably at the end of the presentation. Unless there's something that's burning, then we can interrupt our presenters. So again, thank you all for joining us. Joanna and Jennifer and Lita, I'll go ahead and hand it over to y'all.
All right, thank you, Kathy. My name is Johanna Stafford, and I'm the Training and Staff Development Manager at San Diego Regional Center. And I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves. Jennifer?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Sanchez. I'm a program manager at the San Diego Regional Center over our diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Lita?
And I'm Lita Albright. I'm an instructional design specialist and a master trainer with San Diego State University's Social Policy Institute, which is a nonprofit affiliated with the School of Social Work at the university.
All right, so first of all, let's get started with who is San Diego Regional Center and what is the Regional Center system for those of you who may not be familiar. We were established in state law in California in 1969 under the Lanterman Developmental Disabilities Act. San Diego Regional Center is one of 21 regional centers across the state of California, and we provide support and services to people with developmental disabilities. The name Lanterman may sound familiar to some of you. Frank Lanterman was a longtime state assemblyman in California for almost 30 years, and he was one of the co-authors of the Lanterman-Petrus Short, or the LPS Act, which provided some regulations and statute around mental health needs and treatment. And Frank was a big proponent of folks who had mental health as well as folks who had developmental disabilities. And if you think back to that time in the late 50s, early 60s, when all of this was going on, most folks with mental health crisis or with developmental disabilities were sent to very large state institutions and basically shut away and isolated from the rest of society. They weren't very pleasant places, and that was brought to Mr. Lanterman's attention, and he authored the Lanterman Developmental Disabilities Act, which is the legislation that all regional centers operate under. So we are the second largest regional center in the state of California, and we are the fastest growing regional center in the state of California. At the time we prepared this PowerPoint, we were at about 44,500-ish. I think at this point in February, we've already surpassed 45,000 individuals and families that we're supporting in San Diego and Imperial counties. And I think that's really significant because we know that we serve more people just within San Diego Regional Center than some states serve in their entire state capacity. So it is a really large population that we're working with. Next slide. So our mission and vision, our mission is to serve and empower people with developmental disabilities and their families to achieve their goals with community partners. And our vision reflects our interest in helping those folks live the productive and satisfying lives as valued members of their communities. Our mission and vision are very much grounded in person-centered thinking principles. While we are mindful of the disability that brings somebody to the San Diego Regional Center for supports and services, we want to meet whatever that individual's definition is of productive and satisfying in their own lives. And we want to provide the necessary services and supports that are going to meet those needs. One of the things that we really value at San Diego Regional Center is to provide culturally relevant services and supports. And so that's a little bit about what led us to this journey with San Diego State and how we came to this path of lifting equity through justice, liberty, and belonging. Next slide. So a little background on where we came up with the idea to do this. In December of 2022, the California Department of Developmental Services, or DDS as we affectionately refer to them, they initiated several performance measures for all of the regional centers across the state. One in an effort to sort of standardize our policies and practices across the state, but also to ensure the diversity, equity, inclusion, and access for all of the various people that we serve throughout California. The DDS requirement for diversity, equity, inclusion, and access performance measures was really around frontline staff. And the directive was that all of our case management staff, all of our intake eligibility coordinators, and the managers who supervise them to be trained in cultural humility and competence. So at San Diego Regional Center, again, we serve 45,000 plus people. So we have a staff a little over 1,000 people at this point across 7 offices between San Diego and Imperial counties. SDRC executive leadership required that all of our staff participate in these trainings because we felt it was important not only to have these principles and practices for our frontline staff, but for all of our departments supporting the regional center to be proficient with these concepts and practices, because we engage with one another, even if we're not client facing. And working with the individuals and families directly, we all engage with each other. And when you have 1,000 staff, there's a lot of very cultural backgrounds and perspectives and the ways people work. So we thought it was really important to offer it to everybody. Many of the RCs reached out to sort of general corporate training development resources to look for content for these trainings. But our executive leadership was very thoughtful about wanting a community partner to engage in this work with us. We wanted an organization here locally that understood the communities that make up San Diego and Imperial County, that understand what the challenges are and the complexities that we have within our 2 counties. So that led us to the San Diego State University Social Policy Institute to engage in a discussion about what this could look like and how we might be able to create this content for our staff. And one of the things that San Diego State mentioned to us was using a train the trainer model so that we were able to build capacity here at San Diego Regional Center, so that once we were done with the obligatory 1,000 people finishing the training, that we had a mechanism and the capacity in place that we could continue ongoing and moving forward with these concepts and sort of ever evolving over time. That was something that was very important to us. So the train the trainer model really resonated with us, that this wouldn't be just a one and done, here's the material, we've checked the box and now we're moving on. All right, next slide, please, Kathy. So one of the things that was really wonderful for us was we were introduced to some new language for DEIA to define our work, and that was the justice, liberty, and belonging model. And that was new language for us. We were not familiar with that. You met Jennifer, who's our DEIA manager here in San Diego. So, the DEIA language was very familiar. Justice, liberty, and belonging was not familiar to us. But as soon as we heard it, it really resonated with our teams. And it resonates with the people that we support. I think one of the things we often hear from family members and individuals that we support is that sense of wanting to belong to their communities and having some purposeful engagement with their communities. So the idea of justice, liberty, and belonging really sort of expanded on that idea for us. So we were really excited about that concept. We are a person-centered organization, as I mentioned, and we focus on people's strengths rather than their deficits. So we want to be providing supports and services that are going to enhance those strengths and create the outcomes that each individual wants for their life. Our emphasis on this person-centered thinking has really allowed us to easily expand our engagement with individuals and families through this lens of justice, liberty, and belonging. We're very fortunate here in San Diego that our leadership also is very invested in the person-centered thinking principles. So we have currently 7 certified person-centered thinking trainers and 4 more coming through in the next few months. So that has been a concept and a foundation that we very much build our service delivery from. All right. So our JLB, Justice, Liberty, and Belonging training objectives that were developed, participants will clearly define and articulate the concepts of justice, liberty, and belonging, showcasing their interrelationships. And we learned very quickly that there is a lot of overlap among these concepts of justice, liberty, and belonging, and how those things all work together. Participants will enhance their practical skills and foster a reflective mindset for culturally sensitive and trauma-informed service provision. Both of those things were really important for us to have go together in this training objectives. Participants will explore and implement the tools and the support for essentially seamlessly integrating cultural competency into our service delivery. So that was something we wanted very much for all of our staff to have the language and the tools necessary to engage in a very natural conversation with our families and individuals and with one another, to be able to identify the appropriate supports and services for them. We did not want this to just be a compliance-related training. So we've met the compliance, we've checked the box, we've told DDS we've done this, and one and done, moving on to something else. We really wanted this to be a permanent part of our foundation here at San Diego Regional Center. And these objectives really did fit well with our end goal for all staff to have the tools and the language to be able to collaborate with families and individuals and with one another internally, as well as our service partners and community agencies. All right, next slide. So the JLB curriculum was developed over a period of probably about 6 months in conjunction with San Diego State. One of the first things that we did was we developed a core team of individuals here at the Regional Center that really were reflective of the community that we live in. And we asked those folks to commit to learning and participating in this curriculum and being part of the train the trainer model, so that they will be the folks moving forward with the information when our time with San Diego State is done. These are the components of both sessions. So we divided the material into 2 separate sessions. Each session is about 3.5 hours long. And we've separated them about a month apart. And we did that with the intention of having time for people who went through the sessions to really process and absorb and think about and reflect on these concepts and on these ideas that we were sharing with them in session 1. The group sizes are limited to 30 people maximum, which is quite a feat to accomplish with 1,000 people, but we are about halfway through. I'm really proud to report over the last year, we've gotten about halfway through. But we wanted it to be a safe space for the folks coming in to have conversations and talk about what their particular struggles or challenges or concerns were around this information, and not feel that, they were going to be judged or that there was going to be any punitive actions taken based on people's personal feelings and their own personal reflections. So we've kept the group size to very small at 30 people. At the beginning of session 1, we open up with a pre-assessment, which was developed by San Diego State for us. And it really just gauges what the individual's current sort of knowledge level is, where they sit with some of these principles. Are they familiar with them? Are they things that they use in their work life? And then at the end of session 1, we ask them to do a peer reflection over that month before they come back to session 2. And with those peer reflections, they're provided with 4 prompts. 2 of them are very specifically work related, and 2 of them really take off on a little more personal tangent. And we wanted that to be intentional so that folks who were really only comfortable talking about this in terms of their professional work had a space to do some reflection. But folks who were willing to dive a little deeper and really take an insightful look personally at some of their thoughts and feelings regarding this information also had that opportunity. So one of the work prompts is just to ask them to reflect on their personal understanding of these principles, justice, liberty, and belonging, and how these principles influence their daily work at SDRC. And then one of the personal prompts is asking how their own awareness and exploration of their own social identity has influenced their understanding of themselves, their relationship with others, and their place in society. So it gives folks an option sort of to navigate around their own comfort level. If they're new to this information, then they can answer the work-related prompt. If they're a little more willing to dive a little deeper, then they can do the more personal response. We also offer them the opportunity to contact one of the facilitators, either one of the master trainers that works with us from SDSU or one of the internal SDRC facilitators, if they ever want to sort of explore a little more or have a conversation about some of the things that came up for them in their reflection. So that's been a really helpful component in engaging staff and really thinking about why are we doing all of this. So we also get feedback from SDSU from the pre and a post assessment that's done after session 2. So at the conclusion of session 2, we ask folks to do the post assessment, again, to just gauge where they are on that continuum of understanding and implementing and embracing this information. And we take that information then and we use that data that's collected to sort of really inform and drive how we're going to continue to implement these concepts and keep them at the forefront for all of our staff, because it is a really important tenet for us here at San Diego Regional Center. All right, next slide. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer, who's going to give us kind of the definitions that we came up with based around justice, liberty, and belonging within the disability services community.
Thank you, Johanna. Yes, so I'll get to dive a little bit deeper in some of the content that we are sharing with our staff. And like Johanna mentioned, it is really with the lens of how are we using justice, liberty, and belonging in disability services. So always keeping that lens at the forefront of everything that we're talking about. So we start with justice, and justice is really talking about equal opportunities for the people we serve, right? All of the individuals with developmental or intellectual disabilities. And we also focus on how do we address barriers that may hinder some of that participation in the community. As Johanna mentioned as well earlier, not that long ago, people that we serve and support were institutionalized and marginalized. So how do we work to ensure that we acknowledge that that happens, and it still happens in various ways? And how do we address it, and how do we support our staff to support the individuals? We also talk about fair treatment and protection of the rights of people with disabilities, and we provide resources. There's conversations, there's information sharing, because they do have protection and they have legal safeguards to prevent discrimination. Some of the examples, or one of the examples that we have here as a program, is our employment first policy. And this policy is really helping to make opportunities for integrated competitive employment the highest priority for working age individuals with developmental disabilities, regardless of the severity of their disability. And again, this is in law. This was from Governor Brown, So again, there's talking about legal safeguards and just how we as a regional center, we're committed to empowering adults with disabilities to achieve their career and employment goals in an integrated, competitive wage employment. So again, that's just one of the examples that we share with staff, and we always, after every, it's really open training, so we try to have them ask questions. If they want to think more through things, it's a very open discussion training as well. So the second term is our area that we cover is liberty. And really, this is all about respecting autonomy. Sorry, Kathy, next slide. This is really about respecting autonomy and choice of individuals. Johanna went in detail about our person-centered thinking, and that's really at the forefront of all the work that we do. Is everything that's important to the individual is what we should be talking about. It's the supports we should be putting, and that's really the main goal of all of us that work here, regardless of whether you're in case management or not. We also, liberty can look as differently in many ways, whether it's providing assistive technology, accessible environments, and just tailored support to lead a self-determined life. So again, we can be looking at something as simple as wheelchair access to what accommodations do they need at home, at school, in the community. So again, it's very broad, but these are the conversations that we're having and what that looks like in the work we do. And then one of our main goals is to support people to gain and maintain independence. And again, that looks different, right? Some individuals choose to stay home and have services provided in the home with their parents or with the loved one. Some, decide I want to go live on my own. And then we work with the family and the individual to see what do we need for them to be safe and still honor that decision. Another example that elicits kind of that conversation among the trainers and that we hear is sometimes, individuals, just like we do, sometimes, there's some decisions that might be questionable. And it's really our role just to maybe talk about what are the benefits and the risks and kind of the contrast, right? And helping them make an informed decision. But at the end of the day, if they want to make that choice that we don't agree with, or that maybe doesn't meet the social norms, it's still their choice. And that is their choice to make. So again, around the person-centered thinking, because it is their life and it is their decisions and their choices. Next slide. Please. The last one was belonging, and this one's really about promoting a sense of community and inclusivity in all aspects of a person's life, right? And that may look different to somebody, right? Somebody might want to be out there in the community all the time. Some might be like, no, I can do things virtually. I can. So again, reminding staff that this may look very different to different people. And then how do we support active participation in social connections and relationships? It's really about creating inclusive communities where people with disabilities are not isolated or segregated, because we've been there and we're moving forward and we want to keep moving forward, right? We don't want to go backwards. Another program that highlights a lot of this work is our social recreation program that is really designed to, regardless of their disability, give them the possibility, the opportunity to participate in social and recreational activities through, in either their community or in their home, depending, again, because social recreation looks different to different people. But it doesn't matter of their age. So it's throughout their lifetime. So it's not just for children, as many people think, but adults that, want to take music therapy, swimming, and meeting their friends out in the community. We're able to provide those supports and fund those services, because we really want to encourage individuals to learn social skills, right? To initiate communication with others, develop friendships, and really enhance their natural supports, right? Like getting more people around you to support and help you live a fulfilled life, right? Whatever that means to the individual. Next slide, please. So this is an activity that we have at the beginning of session 1. So as they're coming in, this is a great opening activity. So we have about 15 quotes that you see some of the examples on the slide. And we divide them in half. So 1A, 1B, and it's one quote divided in two. And we give everybody a half of a quote, and we give them the instruction to open it up and go find the other half of your quote. Once they find each other, then they are instructed to have a conversation around what does it mean to them and reflect on that. And then we have 3 posters with justice, liberty, and belonging throughout the room, and it has a short definition as well. And we ask them that once they identify what category they feel or what area they feel that quote falls under, to go and stand by it. And then they get to share out. So we ask, so what was the conversation? Why did you choose that? Tell me more about that. And one of the learnings that we took away as facilitators was they're not all a one, right? Like, it's not just justice. Sometimes it's not just liberty or it's just belonging. Some of the staff were like, I can't decide. I'm in the middle because I feel like it pertains to both or it pertains to all 3. So to us, it was great to hear those conversations, because that's really what we're trying to promote, this notion of no right or wrong answer, or, this is the way to do it. This is the way we should be looking at it. It's really, there is no right or wrong answer. Everybody's perspective is different, and we want to honor that, and we want to hear about it and learn, right? Like really thinking about, as a learner, what am I learning? What do I need to continue learning? So again, very, very engaging activity to start, and it really starts the conversations and it sets the tone for the rest of the session. I feel like people are more engaged and they're comfortable. Again, Johanna talked about safe space. So again, heavy topics, and we try to bring engagement in different ways. And this is a really fun yet very thoughtful activity. Next slide. So many of you probably have heard about intersectionality, and it is one of the trainer's favorites topics. Because intersectionality just really means like there's different parts to who we are, right? And there's some like race, age, gender, where we come from, and these parts can mix right together, and they make us unique. And when we talk about how these parts connect to disabilities, again, bringing it back to the people we serve, we mean that having a disability it's just one part, right? It doesn't mean this makes up the person. It's just one part of the whole person. And we have to constantly remind ourselves of that, because, it's really easy to just kind of focus on what you see and make assumptions. So again, bringing this to the forefront of the staff. It's really about treating everyone fairly and equally, no matter who they are. And it's just, to me, it's just a really good tool to do some self-reflection, to kind of help you think about how do my values, my thinking affect how I interact in the community with staff or directly with the individuals we serve.
Can I just introduce you, Jennifer? I think one of the things that struck us with the intersectionality is obviously when you work with a population of people for a specific concern, right? So for us, it's still disability services, but obviously we interact and have families and individuals who may be part of child welfare services or adult protective services. We have folks who are involved in the criminal justice system. So where is that intersectionality for us versus just looking at that individual and saying, this is a person with a developmental disability who happens to have been arrested for something and is now involved in the legal system. For me, it was very much about looking at some of that intersectionality. We do have a forensics team here that does specialize in working with our clients who do have legal interaction. And that population, unfortunately, has really grown over my tenure in disability services. So it was an opportunity to look at that in a way to see if the intersectionalities that we see with our folks with disabilities who are involved in the legal system, does that intersectionality reflect also what we see in the community at large? So do we see the same sorts of genders or orientations or race that we see in the legal system with the general population? Is that reflective also in our disability services system? And then how do we use that information and that data? How do we get our minds around that in order to really provide better services and supports to those individuals so that it's not a siloed system, right? So we serve you for your disability, but somebody else serves you because of your age maybe, or maybe you go over here for services because you have a gender identity with LGBTQ population, and so you want those services as well. But how can we put all that together and serve that whole person, right? So like in the case of forensics, somebody may go to jail and we may not be giving much thought to that because we don't support those services, right? That's handled by another entity. But now they're coming back out and they are a regional center client again. So how do we support them in a way that honors all of the things that they've been through and all of the intersectionality that they experience in their own life? What are those barriers and challenges to being back in the community look like? And how can we be creative about what we offer and how to best support that person? I think that's why that one probably resonates so much with us, because we tend to get, in that disability services mindset. And that's why they're here when, this really brought to light for us all of these other things that make up this individual and how we as an agency, even though our emphasis is disability services, how do we engage that whole person? And how do we come up with supports and services that meet those needs culturally and every other way?
Right, and something to keep in mind too is that some of these might be situational, as Johanna mentioned, right? So just because you're involved in the legal system right now doesn't mean that's gonna be the lens throughout their lifetime, right? Their ability, our age, there's things that can change within our own identity. So also, again, thinking that it's fluid, right? And it might change within a day, a year, several years. And so I think that's also important to keep in mind. But yeah, great example. Next slide, please. This is another topic and actually activity that we do with the participants that's really eye-opening. We hear a lot of aha moments. A lot of the feedback at the end is really around the social identity wheel. And, this is just telling us, who we are today and how we show up in the world is really based on our lived experiences and the people and places that have shaped us. Because this really influences how we think about our identities and our values, and it informs how we engage with others in our work. And that's, again, that self-reflection, I think, is so important, right? Like, how do my past, my lived experiences, and what am I bringing into work, right, individually? And I think doing that reflection as we go into people's homes and different cultures, making sure that we're kind of checking ourselves, right, and thinking about it in the forefront of our mind. And really, this tool, this wheel, is just an awareness raising practice to recognize what different social identities and how they impact how others perceive us, right? It's a very, very powerful tool, like I mentioned, because it tells you, it makes you think of where am I in privilege, right? It brings about the conversation about privilege in particular areas or as a whole. And we as trainers, when we were working with San Diego State, I know this was a large topic, that a large discussion, where some of us in both ends, we talked about somebody that felt that they had a high level of privilege and they felt like maybe they weren't the most appropriate person to talk about this. And then that kind of opened the conversation, but why do you think that? Why not? And for those of us that were on the opposite of, well, no, I don't think I'm ready, or I don't think I'm the right person to talk about this. And for whatever reason, right? Because I'm a woman, because I'm Hispanic. But really bring that conversation, and then it opened up into conversation about invisible, also things that you can't see, such as mental health, our level of education. And sometimes we don't, some of the things we usually think about are in that blue area, right? Where it's gender, race, things that you can maybe see, but we have to think about other things that we might not see. And then we had a lot of staff that were like, oh, I thought I had no power. But after doing this activity, they're like, I do. And there's this, I don't know, there's this reaction of, okay, again, an aha moment, and reminding, this is probably something that our families and individuals we serve are also feeling. So kind of bringing that back again, like, how do we help the individuals we serve gain that power and remind them that the disability is just one part, right? When we're thinking about a whole, and thinking about, there's power and there's different things that you can pull from and really focus on, and not just that one disability area. So I think that was just so powerful for us as trainers. And thinking about, this is like just the first step, as we were going through this and we wanted to kind of come in and change the world and, just make everybody kind of, think like we do, be culturally proficient. And we quickly learned that that's not happening. That's not gonna happen, right? Because this is a journey where there is no end destination. There's, we learned that you don't check the boxes or you do all of this and then you're culturally proficient. It doesn't work that way. Again, culture shifts, language, there's so many things that are fluid that you're always going to be continuously learning. So I think that was for me one of the biggest learnings, to kind of get that in my head and be like, okay, I'm learning right there with you, right? And that's kind of how we approach it as well. We don't know it all, we're all learning together. And again, we're on this journey together to just learn and keep growing.
And one of the really important principles in person-centered thinking is kind of the power over or power with, right? And so we really want to model power with people, not power over people. And these, the social identity wheel, which led to activities around power and privilege, really lent itself to the work that we've done around the power over and power with in the person-centered model. So it was really nice to see how people were making those connections and how these things are not just independent of one another, but all of these things that we bring to them to benefit them and their work that they're doing really do give them new tools and new ways to kind of connect all of the dots.
Next slide, please. So another concept that we talked about is equitable terminology, and this was in session 2, and we have a lot of the day spent on equitable terminology because, the choice of words do matter, right? We have some examples here, and we actually use these 2 examples and open up the floor for discussion. Is substance abuse versus substance use disorder. And what is the difference, right? And we asked, what do you guys think? And, again, we have very engaging staff that they're quick to share their thoughts, but, for us, it's, the substance abuse really implies some type of like personal failure, right? Like that's within an individual's control. which can create some prejudicial beliefs, and possibly even hinder support, right, public support, for treating addiction as a health condition. Whereas the substance use disorder really lends itself to, it identifies as a behavioral health condition that requires public health support. So I know a lot of staff were like, oh, we never thought of it that way. So again, those aha moments and having that time and space to, let's talk about it. Why has this changed? Why did the terminology change? One of the terms that I personally do not like has always been mentally handicapped. So I'm really happy that we do not use that terminology, and now using the term intellectual disability. And this goes into the people first language. So again, very person-centered approach of it's the people, the person first, the disability second. And sometimes we would say, we don't need to add the disability, it's just the person. So again, moving away from, mentally handicapped really brings a stigma, and can create negative thoughts and even disrespect. So again, I'm glad we're where we're at and we've moved along the way with some of our terminology. And words can be tools for advocacy, that can create change, right? And policies, again, like the changes here, talking about people first. And it just creates a more inclusive and supportive approach to developmental disabilities. So again, just making sure that we are very careful with how we talk about and how we address people. Next slide, please.
Also, one more thing on the equitable terminology, I think was important for us as an agency was we experienced the equitable terminology sort of firsthand by going from this principle of DEIA, the state labeled the performance measure as cultural humility, and then this brilliant reframe by Social Policy Institute into justice, liberty, and belonging, which was much more meaningful for us as an agency and really did resonate for us and for the people that we serve. So we kind of lived that principle in action moving forward. And you don't hear a lot of people talking in terms of DEIA other than referring to Jennifer's team. They were named prior to our brilliant information from STSU. But we really do hear people talking in terms of justice, liberty, and belonging, which has really put a whole new spin on the information for us.
Thank you. And some of the principles that we go over in our training is strengths-based. We kind of been talking about really focusing on what they can do, their assets, their skills, instead of being deficit-driven, right? That we've, again, our community has shifted and our society has shifted from being very deficit driven, right? What can't they do? Are they doing this? Are they doing this? Are they doing this? No, it's what can they do? What are their strengths? And really focusing on that and building on that. Now we understand that we also sometimes have to look at some of the areas that they do need additional supports, but again, having in mind that we have to counterbalance it, right? It's not going to be deficit driven, it's going to be strength based with some deficits if needed, but we'll put some assets and some skills in there. So it's not deficit driven. And that's really important for us in all of the work that we do, not only in the conversations, but the reports that we write. It's that really, we want them to highlight all the great things that they can do and what they're interested in. The other one is non-stigmatizing. We have to avoid discriminatory, prejudicial, any offensive and stigmatizing words. Like I said, we kind of had some examples prior of what are the words that we want to stay away from, because that really creates negative associations and devalues individuals. And that's the opposite of what our mission and vision is, right? Like our vision is to really empower and make sure that they live fulfilled lives and that they're a valued member of the community. So again, we wanna make sure we wanna stay away from that and not promote again, the stigmas that are already in society and out in our communities. The other one is ever evolving. Like I said, we've been adapting to changes in terminology. Because language is fluid and it should be fluid. Like I said, society moves forward, changes, and we should be adapting with society and with their choice, right? So that's also super important. And one term might be okay with somebody and another and not another, right? So when we talk about the person center and really which is the last one, when we're prioritizing the whole person, we have to consider what they want to be identified as. I know I've had people who don't want us to use people first language. We say, oh, it's, the child with a disability, and they're like, no, I'm autistic, and that's how I want to be identified. Then, that's what it is. Again, it's around the person and what their choice is and how they want to be addressed, right? Just like we would honor other people as well, or when people ask us how we want to be addressed. Just keeping that in mind that, yeah, this is the person-centered language in the people first language is great, but it's not a blanket, thing where we're gonna call everybody the same. They're individuals that are unique and want to be identified differently. So again, making sure that we're respectful of that.
All right, next slide, please. So what difference is all of this making at SDRC? One of the really fun things that has come out of this is the SDRC facilitators have initiated a monthly, we call it the JLB Cafe. And we meet monthly to talk about what's working, what's not working within this curriculum. We take into consideration the feedback from the participants, and we look for ways to keep this information fresh and relevant. One of the ideas that came out of the JLB Cafe was to implement a JLB Cafe corner in our monthly newsletter. And we asked staff to provide their feedback about how they're using this in real life situations. What are their mission moments from this? How is this really impacting their work? And then we highlight that in the monthly newsletter. One of the other things that came out of this for us at SDRC was the state has a they are very focused on this initiative as well. And one of the things that they asked the 21 regional centers is, would anybody be interested in having a position for director of equity at your agency to really work on moving this information forward and implementing and keeping it always fresh and evolving. And San Diego, in typical San Diego fashion, we are usually the first ones to raise our hands. But our executive leadership was all in on this idea, and we are now proudly one of only 5 regional centers in the state who does have a director of equity. It's Clorinda Marino, who may be familiar to some of you, been in the field for a really long time. And we're very, very excited to have her on board here as our director of equity at the San Diego Regional Center. So that's just some of the ways that it's impacted here at San Diego in ways that it's making a difference. Next slide. So before I turn it over to Lita, just really, next slide, please, Kathy. What is our staff saying about JLB? And these are quotes taken directly from the feedback that we get from the assessments from SDSU. People are learning a lot of great things. I think one of the most exciting things for me about this is that, like I said, we now hear people around the agency engaging in these conversations in terms of justice, liberty, and belonging. They're brainstorming together and looking at ways to enhance our customer service, both internally and externally, looking for ways to make this experience better and more culturally relevant to all the parties involved. People are discussing that it's been professionally enriching to them, but also very personally enriching to them. And that was one of our concerns setting out on this adventure, was really navigating the boundaries around professional and personal. We realize that this material can become very personal. And for those who are interested in going there, that's fabulous, and we're willing to support them and have those conversations. But being mindful that some people are not quite there, and so keeping those professional sort of guardrails around, how are we using this in our daily work? And it's just really exciting because we had a lot of hesitancy in the beginning from a lot of individuals who said, you know, one more training. I'm sure your organizations like ours are experiencing a lot of changes, so there's a lot of training fatigue happening, and folks saw this as one more thing they had to do, thought they already knew it, material that had already been covered, takes too long, you asking us to come twice to do this. But then to get this sort of feedback from them that it was one of the best things that they've ever done here, was really, really very affirming to us. So to hear people using these principles is really amazing, and we're just really looking forward to how we're going to carry this forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lita.
Thank you. And welcome, everyone. It's nice to see so many familiar faces here. I just want to tell you how excited I am to share this innovative journey of the San Diego State University SPI and the San Diego Regional Center. We're two partners that are united by a common vision for prevention and equity. Our approach to a partnership integrates three pillars: readiness, sustainability, and connection. And readiness ensures that we are proactively prepared to meet evolving community needs. Sustainability builds a long-term capacity through strong relationships and ongoing skill development. And connection bridges our local efforts with statewide standards. And together, these elements create a resilient, equitable system where immediate action and lasting impact work hand in hand to transform mental health and child services. And Joanna touched on all of these pillars when she spoke about SDRC embracing JLB and having everyone from the top of the organization chart to the bottom of the organization chart be involved in this learning process. She talked about their desire to partner with local organizations to co-design and implement the training. That includes communities of practice, so discussions continue internally after the initial training is over. Next slide, please. I want to talk about our third pillar. It's called connection, and that bridges our local efforts with broader statewide frameworks. And the HOPE, which stands for Healthy Outcomes from Positive Experiences, is a model that emphasizes recovery, resilience, and proactive engagement in mental health and social services. And tomorrow, Dr. Sege is going to be one of your keynotes, and he's going to talk about that HOPE process. The integrated core practice model provides a unifying blueprint for child serving systems within counties. So various organizations from a county come together and form a particular model for prevention. And so by aligning our prevention strategies with the HOPE model and the ICPM, we create a clear pathway that ensures that our local practices contribute to and benefit from statewide standards and innovations. And this combination of readiness, sustainability, and connection, and the strategic alignment with HOPE and ICM creates a powerful model for prevention. Next slide, please. So how can we replicate this? Well, just by short, I'll just say transforming our community starts at the top, and Johanna touched on that a bit. When leaders buy into embedding equity, and we build that capacity internally by the trainers, while engaging the community, we set the stage for lasting change. Next slide, please. So here, I always like to talk about what is our action? What's our role in this work? What could be our call to action? As we know in this field, change doesn't happen overnight, but it's those small intentional steps that lead to the long-term transformations that we're all looking for. So I'd like you to ask yourself, what's one step that you could take this week to advance equity in your agency? And I even wanted you to go further, because it's not just about the work we do from 8 to 5 or whatever your hours are. But equity is everywhere. So what's one step that you can take this week to advance equity, even in your home? That's the part that just takes it deeper so that you can have a different sense of that ownership of it. And I want to leave you with this thought before we go to questions. What we've shared today is not just a model, but a roadmap for transforming our workplaces and our communities into spaces where every individual, including children, youth, and families with intellectual and developmental disabilities, have the opportunity to thrive. So let's take these small intentional steps together to make equity not just an aspiration, but a reality. Next page, please. And if you'd like to have more information on this process, please feel free to contact me or Lori Clark at SPI or Johanna at the San Diego Regional Center, and we're more than happy to discuss this with you. And I know that we're a little getting close to the end of this, but I do want to give people the opportunity to ask questions. And I know that Kathy's been tracking some questions. So Kathy, do you want to go ahead and give the question and we'll respond?
Yeah, I have one question, just a broad sense, and I know Johanna and that you all had kind of touched on this, but really, what were some of the challenges that you ran into, and that you can share, and how you overcame those challenges in terms of the implementation and the buy-in, that sort of thing?
So I think, again, having this come from our executive leadership was huge for getting the rest of the organization to buy into this. And the ability to have these conversations with San Diego State, because there was hesitation to training all of our staff on material that seemed to be more relevant to the folks with the boots on the ground, if you will, the folks serving the families and individuals at San Diego Regional Center. So being able to have those conversations with SDSU and being able to engage all of our stakeholders here in San Diego Regional Center to bring their thoughts and questions around this, and to really kind of address head on some of these hesitancies that people had. And some of them from our auxiliary departments were questions around, how is this relevant to me? I don't work with our clients. I work in business services. I process receivables and payables. So really having those conversations and using the guidance from San Diego State on how to implement examples and use what the work is that they're doing and how they're interacting with the whole organization is really what made this helpful to us in San Diego. And we really did try to be very conscious about having folks from business services come as a group, because they share the same often concerns or hesitations. So we have most of our client services all go through it together. The folks who would need the relevant examples of what the work in the field looks like versus the folks kind of behind the scenes, if you will, and being able to tailor some of the examples and information to them specifically.
And for me, I think I'll bring it to the staff perspective. I think for the trainers that were selected for this training, it's being completely transparent. It was really hard, and not everybody that we thought were going to be trainers became trainers, because we quickly realized we talked about trauma-informed lens, and I, as a manager, because some of them were my staff, we had to really think about, is this something that all of us need to do, and are we ready for it, right? We all have very different lived experiences and different traumas that we've lived through our lifetime and recently, right, with the political climate and things like that. So I think it's also important to acknowledge that, because that was something that Johanna and I talked through and said, okay, who should be the trainers? We don't want people training that are not comfortable, because it is a heavy topic, and if you're not comfortable, then we kind of had internally those discussions, and SDSU was right there with us as well. And I think bringing that outside perspective, personally, when I had doubts about I don't know if I'm the right person to train, is, and kind of walking us through, like, yes, you are, you know, you work here, you have this mission, you have this vision, you're doing the work, you know, it's just, how do we prepare ourselves to be in front of the classes, right? Because some of them were trainers from the training team. Half of us are non-trainers, that really went through this and kind of, you know, we're like, you know, but, you know, at the end of each training, it's just, it's so nice to learn again, side by side. I really hear the people say like, oh, this has been great. I learned so much. And that, I think, just about, you know, it affirms everything and all the conversations that we had behind the scenes around some of these topics. So I think that, I think for me was a big part of the learning and a challenge that thankfully we were able to address, and the trainers love training on this now. So again, a challenge that I think we might have not expected, but we were able to kind of work it through.
I'd say that from our side, I don't know if I call it a challenge or not, but we come with in the training, so we did the first pass on it. So we've got like a fire hose amount of information that we're giving out to everybody. And then it's how do we get together to try to bring it down to what this organization wanted for themselves. So it's kind of like an opportunity to learn from each other. And it was also interesting to come into a group of people that were already trainers. That was also different. So it kind of the dynamics were a little better, I think, because trainers, they already training their staff, they know what their organization needs. And then how do we pull all this information we have? How do we pull back on that fire hose to get them what they want? And I think it came out pretty well. I'm really excited by this team. They're a great group of trainers.
Thank you. Likewise, Lita.
Nice. Thank you all for sharing. Well, I think we're right just about time. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined us this afternoon. And thank you to Joanna, Jennifer, and to Lita for sharing your model with us, and just really being able to share your whole person approach. This is just such an important perspective to take in this work. So thank you all very much for joining us. And I believe now we can all join back into the main HUVA larger room for a closeout and preparation for tomorrow's event. So thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.